Well, thanks so much for being with us here on Morning Live and turning our attention now to a very important matter. Now, the Women and Men Against Child Abuse organization will be writing to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Ronald Lamula, requesting a progress report on a matter relating to the former South African teacher, Iain. Now, the 83-year-old Wes is facing extradition from South Africa to the United Kingdom for alleged sexual abuse charges that were laid by 40 of his former students who attended the Edinburgh Academy and Fettes College in Scotland between the 1960s and 1970s. Now, prior to teaching in Scotland, Wes was a teacher at the Western Province Prep School and St. George's Grammar School in the Western Cape. And after coming back to South Africa, it's reported that he continued teaching at the Rondebosch Boys Prep School. So just taking a look at some of the background there, we are now joined in conversation to talk about what has been happening in this case, and also just to give us more details and talk about some of the issues that we are touching on here. We're joined by Neil Douglas, who is a child sexual abuse survivor. And also with us this morning is Peter Panike, Director at the Women and Men Against Child Abuse. Gentlemen, thank you so much to both of you for joining us, and welcome to Morning Live. So let me start with you, Neil, and let me first just say thank you so much for being brave and vulnerable to share with us your story this morning. We appreciate it because we know it can't be easy, but hopefully this would go a long way to helping others in dealing with what this particular scourge that has gripped our country as well is highlighting. But thank you so much for that. So, Neil, if I can just start with you, just in terms of this case and looking at what's happening in our country, a lot of the cases that we hear either anecdotally or that are before the courts. What would you say is the situation right now in South Africa with child abuse?
I'm afraid I'm no expert on child abuse in South Africa, but you do have a couple of our prolific paedophiles hiding out in your country at the moment.
And that, of course, is a problem because looking at the case that we just highlighted in the intro, and Peter, from your side, we look at this case, it seems like a watertight extradition case against Iain for alleged child abuse crimes in the United Kingdom. And then the questions start arising. Why has it taken so long to proceed with this case? What do you know at this stage about it, Peter?
Thank you. Okay, so firstly, I'm not an extradition agreement expert, although I'm a practicing attorney at Evershed Sutherland, and I'm also a director of Women and Men Against Child Abuse. And I haven't been privy to all the circumstances, but what we do know is that on the 23rd of August 2019, the Magistrates Court in Simonstown found that there was sufficient information against Wes to extradite him, which was a request by the UK authorities. Wes was granted bail pending the decision of the Minister of Justice, and on the 9th of September, Wes then made representations to the Minister of Justice. In those representations, he admitted and confessed to having committed a myriad of offences, sexual offences against young boys in Scotland. What we also know is that the minister must have granted the extradition agreement, and that we say so because we know that Wes is now appealing the minister's decision in the High Court in Cape Town. And that, in fact, to be fair to the minister, is where the delay has occurred, because Wes's adopted a very technical approach about the definitions, the different definitions of sexual offences in South Africa and Scotland, and quite frankly, given the disgusting conduct that he's admitted to, I find it difficult to understand how such an argument would succeed, but obviously that's a matter for the courts. And unfortunately, the appeal has been postponed until October, I think it is, of this year. So that must be incredibly frustrating for people like Neil and all the other, we think, hundreds of victims of Wes's conduct. So, it's frustrating for everyone. Unfortunately, the legal system doesn't move quickly, as it doesn't in many jurisdictions around the world, but I'm sure that doesn't help the poor victims who have suffered for so long as a result of Wes's conduct.
And one wants to say it's almost, tantamount to secondary victimization, having to watch all of this play out. And Neil, you're nodding at that. Perhaps, if you will tell us your story, please, given how things are playing out at the moment.
Yeah, it's been 50 years since Wes abused me, and the matter has been in a legal process in Scotland since 2016, I think it was. 2019, he was found extraditable in South Africa. And actually, we don't, as survivors, have any understanding of why 4 years later he still hasn't had that extradition appeal heard. It was scheduled for March this year, which I think was a delay from a previous one, and now it's scheduled out to October. And the question we've kind of got is, are the South African justice system just going to keep kicking the ball down the court? I mean, the man is 84 at the end of this month. He could well die in comfort in his luxury apartment home in Cape Town and never actually face justice for what he did. And you talked about secondary abuse. It is like secondary abuse. We were abused all those years ago and silenced, and now we started to speak out. We're effectively being silenced and abused again because he is just sitting there enjoying life as if nothing happened. Doesn't seem fair.
It certainly doesn't. But you mentioned his age, and you mentioned the fact of, the wheels of justice turning excruciatingly slow at this point. As you say, 4 years waiting after the legal processes, and you would have hoped that there would be further movement by now. But what would it mean to you, Neil, just hypothetically speaking, if it got to a point where Iain Wes isn't extradited to stand trial for the allegations against him? What would that mean to you as a victim?
It's something I've obviously thought about a lot, and as victims, we've talked about it. It just would feel like a massive injustice. There is an opportunity for justice to happen. The opportunity has been there for years, and it's been he's effectively, he's been found extraditable 4 years ago. For that man to get away with it would break the hearts of a lot of people whose hearts are already broken. If I can borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, Nikki Campbell, who said that yesterday, it would be unconscionable that he gets away with it by dint of just getting old and dying.
And I think, the importance of doing a program like this, one hopes would go some way to not only highlight, but perhaps help with the wheels of justice turning ever so slow, slightly faster at this point. But I want to come back to you, Peter, regarding the legalities around this matter, because until recently, Wes was only referred to by a pseudonym, Edgar. So what were the legal processes that led to his identity finally being made public, and why wasn't he allowed to be named?
Again, I'm making assumptions here and presumptions, but I would imagine that when the action was instituted in the magistrate's court, and he was found to be that he should be extradited that matter would then have been become public knowledge in the in the open, and presumably it would have been then or thereafter that they would have stopped calling him by the pseudonym and being able to name him. And as I mentioned, he's also now appealed to the High Court, and obviously that's also public knowledge. So I would imagine that's when he stopped being called by his pseudonym.
Would think that it would actually help if people are named so that we know. We talk about these child offences registers, but they don't help if people actually are not named, and nobody actually looks at these records when they appoint people or things like that are supposed to happen. But just coming back to you, Neil, with regard to the victims, we talk about the fact that Wes could potentially exit this world given his advanced age, but the victims themselves, they could potentially die without having justice meted out to them. And I'm sure these are discussions that you've had amongst yourself. And I cannot even imagine one perhaps dying with that broken heart of not having seen justice.
Yeah, no, it is tough, and a number of our friends have sadly taken their own lives over the years, not able to cope with the pain of this. So it's had that impact on them as well. One of my friends talks about just wanting to be able to go back and grow his tomatoes, and I think that's a reference to it'd be nice for this just to be dealt with, for justice to be done, for the voices to be heard, for the stories to be affirmed, and effectively a public apology in the sense of Ware's being found guilty for the crimes that he's committed. That would give a lot of people a lot of peace.
He also spoke about, his urges to touch boys, in one of the affidavits that he deposed. But this is a teacher, this was a teacher. This was someone not only in a position of power and authority, but one in a position of trust for young children. And he betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. And when you think about that, and you think about the fact that there are many Iain Wares still sitting in our school systems, Neil, what do you say to young children? What can they possibly do to try and protect themselves in a situation like this?
That's a real tough one. One of the reasons for being willing to speak out about what happened publicly is to raise awareness of the issue, and to make it less likely that people will be able to hide and carry on abusing in the situations they're in. But the fact is, if you're a 10-year-old child, you probably don't understand sex and what's happening to you, and we certainly didn't as children. So it's a really hard one to be able to say to children what they should do. Because it's not something they necessarily have the language to understand. And here is a trusted grown-up, someone whose care they've been put into, who's doing things to them. And as a survivor said, isn't this what all adults do? Isn't this how all teachers behave? So I think it's behoven upon all of us around children to watch for signs of abuse, to watch for signs of them, their mood changes, and to keep an honest account of the other adults around us and make sure that they're behaving properly.
And unfortunately, this is not a once-off. It's not a peculiar incident, Peter. One thinks of one of the more high-profile cases that we've dealt with here in South Africa of around child abuse. There was the South African retired tennis coach Bob Hewitt. And he was paroled after spending 3 years of his 6-year sentence. And you look at the advanced age of Wes and the influence over this matter and the way that it's been handled by the court, the way time is lapsing on this. Again, is there something that could be done for justice for the victims?
So I was intimately involved in the prosecution of Hewitt and opposing his parole application, which we did once successfully. But one of the issues that parole board did give some weight to was his age and his, according to him, his ill health. But I don't think the same applies here, because Wes in his affidavit says that he's in good health, and I don't believe that should be a criteria for whether or not he should be extradited. But of course, I presume he might try and play that card. But as I say, he has gone on record as saying that he's in good health.
Only so that he can actually face the system and, pay for his sins. But just before we go, as we have to wrap this up now, Peter, let me start with you. In terms of the extradition process, you did explain earlier where the case is now, and the Minister of Justice, and to what extent his hands might be tied in this matter. But, just in terms of trying to speed it up at this stage, what could possibly be done?
I'm not certain there's anything. When we discussed the justice system delaying this, that's not correct at all. It's Wes, for obvious reasons, delaying this. He's the one who's pushing it out. He's the one who's appealing the minister's decision. And it's been postponed. I'm not certain. Certainly, I don't think anything the Minister of Justice can do about it. And this is a situation where it's been postponed to this date. I don't have the background facts. But I'm not certain, and I know that doesn't help, but I'm not certain there is that much that can be done in a civil action such as this, which has been postponed in the High Court.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But just finally, from your side, very briefly, Neil, you spoke about awareness. Your final word on this?
We're going to continue to believe that one day Wes will face a justice system for the crimes that he's done.
Iain Wes, that's the name. But thanks so much to our guest this morning, Neil Douglas, child sexual abuse survivor, and Peter van Niekerk, director at Women and Men Against Child Abuse, talking to us about the child sexual abuse charges against former teacher Iain Wes and his extradition process from South Africa to the United Kingdom that really is taking a very long time. So this awareness absolutely necessary. And tell us your views at Morning Live SABC. We need to take a quick break before we bring you the news at 8.